My brother-in-law had the audacity to stand up at my sister's wedding reception, my sister's wedding, the one I helped pay for, point at me in front of 200 guests, and say, "She's been lying to all of you. She didn't pass the bar. She's not a real lawyer." The room went dead quiet. I set down my champagne glass very slowly. My hands were completely steady. I'd learned how to do that years ago, in a courtroom during a cross-examination that lasted 6 hours while opposing counsel tried everything to rattle me. "Sit down, Patrick," I said. He didn't sit down. That moment is where this story really starts, but to understand it, you need to go back about 2 years, because what happened at that wedding didn't come out of nowhere. It was the end of something that had been building for a long time, brick by brick, mostly by people who loved me, or said they did. My name is Raina. I'm 31 years old. I'm a licensed attorney in the state of New York, and I've been since I passed the bar on my first attempt at 26. I work primarily in employment law, which means I spend most of my days fighting for people who got cheated by their employers. Unpaid wages, wrongful termination, workplace discrimination. I'm good at my job. I'm not saying that to brag. I'm saying it because it becomes important later. My family is big and loud and deeply suspicious of anyone who acts like they're better than everyone else. That's a direct quote from my uncle, said to me at Thanksgiving when I was 19 and had just gotten into Columbia Law on a partial scholarship. He meant it as a warning. I'd heard versions of that warning my whole life, usually when I came home with a good grade, or when I got a scholarship, or when I mentioned that I was studying instead of coming to the 4th of July party. My sister Vanessa is 4 years older than me. Growing up, she was the pretty one and I was the smart one, which in my family meant she got the attention and I got the advice to tone it down a little. Vanessa and I were close in that complicated way sisters are. We'd go weeks without talking and then spend an entire Saturday on the phone. I loved her. I still love her. But Vanessa had always had a certain talent for surrounding herself with men who needed to feel bigger than the women around them. Patrick was the pinnacle of that talent. She met him at a gym. He was a personal trainer who had, at one point, applied to become a police officer and not made it through the psychological evaluation. He never talked about that part. What he talked about, constantly, was how he could read people, how he had great instincts, how he always knew when someone was full of it. He said that last part looking at me the first Thanksgiving I met him. I smiled and asked him to pass the rolls. Over the next year and a half, Patrick made it his part-time hobby to cast doubt on my career. At first, it was small things. Lawyers are basically professional liars, right? At a family birthday party, everyone laughed, including Vanessa. Then it escalated. He started asking me questions designed to trip me up. What's the statute of limitations on this? What does this legal term mean? What would you do in this hypothetical? And when I answered, he'd squint like he wasn't quite convinced. "I don't know," he'd say slowly. "I looked that up once and I don't think that's right." He had never looked anything up. But here's the thing about my family. They wanted to believe him. Not because they disliked me exactly, but because Patrick was charming and confident and always there, at every cookout and every Sunday dinner. And I was the one who called to cancel plans because I had a brief due. I was the one who couldn't come to Christmas Eve because I was second-chairing a trial that had run into the holiday week. I was absent in all the ways that are impossible to explain to people who've never worked that hard for something. And Patrick was present. And presence is its own kind of currency. By the time Vanessa got engaged, Patrick had successfully planted enough seeds that at least 3 of my aunts believed I worked at a law firm in Lake, an administrative capacity. My own mother had stopped correcting people when they said I helped out at a law office. I didn't find out about that until much later. The wedding was in June, at a vineyard upstate. It was a Saturday. Gorgeous day. One of those early summer days where everything looks slightly too perfect, like a movie set. I was a bridesmaid. I'd spent the entire morning getting my hair done and helping Vanessa into her dress, and making sure the florist delivered the right centerpieces to the right tables. I had written a toast that I'd been revising for 3 weeks because I wanted it to be exactly right. The ceremony was beautiful. I cried. Vanessa cried. Even my father, who cries at nothing, pressed his fingers to his eyes during the vows. The reception was in a converted barn on the property. String lights, long wooden tables, a band that played Fleetwood Mac covers. It was the kind of wedding you see on Pinterest, and Vanessa deserved every bit of it. I gave my toast between the salad and the main course. I talked about growing up sharing a bedroom with Vanessa, about how she used to let me crawl into her bed during thunderstorms even when I was too old for it, about the specific way she laughed when something caught her off guard. People were smiling. Vanessa was crying again. It was exactly what I wanted. I sat down feeling good, present, happy. The main course arrived. I was mid-conversation with my cousin on my left when I noticed the table getting quieter in sections, like a wave moving through the room. I looked up. Patrick was standing. He had a champagne glass in one hand and the other hand raised like he was about to make a toast. Except he was looking at me. "I actually want to say something," he said, loudly enough that the band, which had paused between songs, didn't restart. Vanessa said, "Patrick, we're eating." "It'll just take a second." He smiled at her. Then he looked back at me. "I've been thinking about this for a while, and honestly, I feel like it's something this family deserves to know." My stomach dropped. Not because I was afraid. I wasn't. Not exactly. But because I recognized the look on his face. I'd seen it in depositions. It was the look of someone who had convinced themselves they were about to do something righteous. "Renina has been telling everyone she's a licensed attorney," he said. "A real one, in New York." He paused for effect. I did some checking, and I'm not sure that's actually true. The room was silent in a way that felt physical. 200 people not breathing. My mother said quietly, "Patrick." "I'm serious," he said. I asked around. I talked to some people. Nobody can verify it, and I think if she actually had a license, she'd be able to prove it, right? So, he spread his hands like he was being completely reasonable. "I think we should ask her." I want to tell you that I felt a lot of things in that moment. Humiliation, hurt, fury. A very specific kind of grief that comes from watching someone who has access to you use that access as a weapon in a room full of the people who are supposed to love you. I felt all of that. And then I set down my champagne glass. "Patrick," I said, "sit down." He didn't sit down. He actually laughed a little. "See, this is what she does. She deflects. I'm going to say this once," I said. My voice was completely even. "Years of courtrooms. You just accused me of fraud in front of my family. That's defamation. And I am, in fact, a licensed attorney in the state of New York. Bar number 524-7801. You can look it up on the New York State Unified Court System's attorney search database right now on your phone. It takes about 45 seconds. Silence. "Furthermore," I continued, "because once I start, I tend to finish. I've been the associate handling the Meridian wrongful termination case for the past 14 months. We settled last week for $2.3 million. My name is on the settlement agreement. My name is on the filing. My name is on the court record." Patrick's smile had gone somewhere. I wasn't sure where. "And third." I looked at him very steadily. "I need you to understand that what you just did, in front of these witnesses on the record of this event, constitutes defamation per se under New York law because you made a false statement about my professional competence, which means damages are presumed. I don't have to prove harm. The statement itself is the harm." My uncle, the one who warned me about acting too big for my boots, said from the back of the room, "Someone look it up." 3 people reached for their phones. It took about 30 seconds. My cousin found it first. She held her phone up and turned it around so the table near her could see. Then she stood up and walked it to my father, who held it the way fathers hold phones when they're reading something for the first time, tilted slightly and at arm's length. He looked at the screen for a long moment. Then he looked at Patrick. "It's her," my father said. "Photo and everything." What happened next is one of the strangest things I have ever witnessed, and I've sat across from some genuinely unhinged human beings in my professional life. Patrick did not apologize. He did not sit down and become small and quiet the way I expected. Instead, he pivoted, immediately, to, "I was just trying to protect the family. I was trying to look out for everyone. There are a lot of scammers out there, and I just wanted to make sure." He said this to a room that had just watched him publicly accuse his wife's sister of fraud at their wedding reception. Vanessa was looking at him with an expression I had never seen on her face before. It wasn't anger exactly. It was something more like recognition. The slow, nauseating kind, where you realize a thing has been true for a long time and you just hadn't let yourself see it. She said very quietly, "Sit down, Patrick." He sat down. The band started playing again after a moment, because what else do you do? And people gradually went back to their meals, but the air in the room had changed completely. My mother reached across the table and squeezed my hand. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. After dinner, my aunt, my father's sister, who had been in my corner exactly 0% of the time for the last 2 years, came and found me near the dessert table. She said, "I always knew you were a lawyer. I just didn't want to argue with Patrick." I looked at her for a long moment. "That's a strange thing to be proud of," I said, and I walked away. I know that sounds harsh, and maybe it was. But I had spent 2 years watching people who knew the truth stay quiet because it was easier than disagreeing with a man who worked out for a living and had a loud, confident voice. I didn't have a lot of grace left in me that night for people who chose comfortable silence over the truth. The weeks after the wedding were complicated in the way that family things always are. Patrick issued what I can only describe as a non-apology. A long text message to the family group chat explaining that he had concerns and had expressed them poorly, and that he hoped everyone could move past this. There was no acknowledgement that he had accused me of a crime. There was no acknowledgement that he had done it in public, at Vanessa's wedding, during what should have been the most important night of her life. Just, I expressed my concerns poorly. Let's move on. I did not respond to the text. What I did do, about a week later, was sit down with a colleague who specializes in defamation cases, a woman I'd clerked with, someone I trusted completely, and I described the situation in full detail. She listened, she asked a few questions, then she said, "You have a case." I want to be honest with you here, because I think people sometimes expect these stories to end with lawsuits and courtrooms and dramatic legal victories, and the reality is more complicated than that. I did consult with my colleague, I did have grounds, and I made a decision that I want to explain. I didn't sue Patrick. Not because I forgave him, not because I thought what he did was acceptable. I didn't sue him because Vanessa came to my apartment 3 weeks after the wedding and sat at my kitchen table for 4 hours and cried in a way I hadn't seen her cry since we were children. And she told me that she had been seeing things clearly for a while and that she was scared and that she needed time to figure out what she was going to do. She asked me not to protect Patrick, but to give her space to handle her own life on her own timeline without her marriage becoming a legal case. I said okay. What I did instead was send Patrick a letter. My colleague helped me write it. It was formal, professional, and specific. It outlined exactly what he had done, cited the relevant statute, documented the witnesses and the date and the venue. It detailed the legal exposure he had created for himself, and it informed him that I was retaining all rights to pursue this matter and that any further statements made by him regarding my professional qualifications or credentials would result in immediate legal action. He never acknowledged it. But he never said anything about me again either. Not at family events, not in the group chat, not anywhere I could find. My mother called me a month after the wedding and said, "I should have said something sooner. When people got the wrong idea about what you did, I let it go because it felt like less trouble. That wasn't right." She cried a little. I let her cry. Then I told her I loved her and that I wasn't going anywhere. Vanessa and Patrick separated the following January. She moved back home for a few months and then got her own apartment in Hoboken. She seems lighter now, in the way people seem lighter when they've put something down they've been carrying for too long. We talk on the phone most Sundays. It's easy in a way it hasn't been in years. I don't know what Patrick does now. I don't think about it very much. He was a man who needed to make other people smaller to feel large enough, and there are a lot of people like that in the world. The best thing I ever did was refuse to be made smaller. Here's the thing I want you to understand about that moment at the reception. The moment when Patrick was standing with his champagne glass and the whole room was silent and waiting to see what I would do. I was not calm because I was fearless. I was calm because I had spent years in rooms where someone was trying to take something from me. And I had learned that the most devastating thing you can do to a person who expects you to collapse is to simply not collapse. He expected tears. He expected denial, stumbling, the hot-faced confusion of someone caught in a lie. He had probably rehearsed for that version of me. He had not rehearsed for bar number 5247801 and a 14-month settlement record. He had not rehearsed for someone who knew, down to the statute, exactly what he had just done to himself. I picked up my champagne glass. I looked around at my family, some of them ashamed, some of them relieved, some of them still processing, and I took a sip. And I thought, I have worked for 12 years to be exactly who I am. I passed every test. I logged every hour. I wrote every brief. I showed up every single time, even when no one was watching, even when it cost me birthday parties and Christmases and the easy, comfortable feeling of being the one who never made anyone uncomfortable. No one in that room was ever going to take that from me. Especially not a man who failed a psych eval and decided, as his consolation prize, to spend the rest of his life making other people feel unqualified. I don't tell this story for sympathy. I tell it because I think there are a lot of people out there who have been quietly doubted by the people closest to them, not by strangers, not by enemies, but by family, which is so much harder to defend yourself against because the love makes it complicated. And I want those people to know that the answer is not to explain yourself more clearly, or be more patient, or wait for people to come around. The answer is to know exactly who you are and what you've done, down to the number, down to the date, down to the statute. Because when the moment comes, and it will come, you want to be ready. I keep coming back to that moment when Patrick stood up, champagne glass in hand, 200 people watching, and I think about what he actually believed was going to happen. He thought I would crumble. He had spent 2 years, quietly chipping away at my credibility, one dinner at a time, and he genuinely believed that when he finally swung hard in public, there would be nothing solid left to hit. That's the part that stays with me. Not the anger. Not the humiliation of having to defend myself at my own sister's wedding. What stays with me is the reminder that the work you do in private is the only thing that protects you when someone tries to undo you in public. Every brief I filed at midnight, every deposition I prepared for on a Saturday when everyone else was at the lake, every time I chose the hard thing over the comfortable thing, that was the armor Patrick ran into. He just didn't know it was there until he walked straight into it. There's something I've come to understand about cause and effect that has nothing to do with luck or fate. It's simpler than that. The choices you make consistently, over years, produce outcomes. Patrick chose to be the kind of man who tears people down instead of building anything real, and the outcome of that choice was a room full of witnesses watching him fact-check himself into a corner. I chose to do the work, to know my field, to be exactly who I said I was. And the outcome of that choice was a bar number I could say out loud without flinching. I don't think Patrick was a villain in the dramatic sense. I think he was a man who had never developed the discipline to build something real, so he redirected all of that energy into dismantling what other people had built. That's not evil. It's just a very specific kind of smallness, and it tends to be self-correcting eventually. Vanessa figured that out. She's the one who paid the highest price for it, and she's also the one who had the courage to stop paying it. What I want to say, if you've ever been in a room where someone used their access to you as a weapon, where the person doing the damage was someone who was supposed to love you, is this: integrity is not about being unshakable in the moment. It's about having something true enough underneath you that when the moment comes, you don't have to perform confidence. You just have it, because you earned it. I earned bar number 52478.01. I earned the Meridian settlement. I earned every piece of proof I didn't have to scramble for because it had always been exactly where I left it. That's not intelligence alone, and it's not toughness alone. It's what happens when you do right by your own potential long enough that the record speaks for itself. Patrick needed me to be a fraud because it was easier than looking at his own reflection. I wasn't. That's the whole story.